Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode. In today's episode, me and guest Danny Foulkes go through our top 10 worst trades in NFL history. Me and Danny go through some historical trades from back in the day.
Not comparable to any others in terms of the amount of capital that they gave away.
There's one trade that I completely forgot about.
Yeah, I'd actually forgot about this.
And me and Danny rank our number one worst trade in NFL history. Hope you guys enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. Series 5 is up and going. We're episode 2 now of our brand new series ahead of the 2025 NFL season. And today we've got a very special episode. But before we do that, on this day, on the 14th of March in 2006, the Saints signed quarterback Drew Brees. He went on to become the all-time leader in passing yards, passing touchdowns and completions, and also a Super Bowl champion and Super Bowl MVP, and was named to 13 Pro Bowls and was named first team All-Pro back in 2006 as well. And also on this day in 1978, a seventh official, the side judge, was added to the officiating crew. The NFL still uses the 7 on-field officials today. And if you're listening and it's your birthday today, you share a birthday with Kenneth Gainwell and Brandon Aubrey. So happy birthday to Kenneth and Brandon. So today's episode, we are doing another top 10, and this time we are doing our top 10 worst trades in NFL history. With me, I've got a returning guest to help me combine my top 10. Back on the show today is Danny Foulkes, also known as First Down Danny. Danny, great to have you on.
Hello, mate. Thank you for having me back. Thank you.
No problem at all. It's been a lot since last came on. And yeah, good to have you back on. Good to have you back on the show as we try and compile this top 10 list.
I'm sure we'll have some crossovers along the lines, but there has been some very bad trades over the years, so I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, it's been some absolute stinkers. And on the other end of the spectrum, from the negative to the positive, if you haven't already checked it out, me and Meg, otherwise known as Ballers Meg, they're our top 10 free agent signings of all time. That is out. That came out last week. So if you haven't already listened to that, go give a check out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, or however you get your podcasts. And don't forget, if you are missing DraftKings in the UK, head over to fantasygameday.app and use code Andy5 for a chance of money back off your first paid lineup. So, Danny, as you're the guest, always the common courtesy, I'll let you go first. We're still going to try and go give our sort of 10 best nominees for most disappointing trades. There's some factors, like there's some trades where it's more about the team that traded them away more than the team that traded for them. So those ones, I'll mention them at the end, but those ones I've not included. But Danny, I'll let you go first for your first nominee for our top 10 list of worst ever NFL trades.
Oh, I feel brutal saying this one because as a player, I quite like him, but Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos takes very, very highly in my rundown. The capital that he went for, and then ultimately what ended up happening with the Broncos just means that I couldn't overlook that one. And I hate that because of the Steelers. I don't mind him. As a player, don't mind him. But that trade particularly was chaos.
Yeah, I remember when it came out, and actually, that was actually one of our collections on this day in our last episode. I remember I was actually on a university trip at the time, going to watch Crawley against Bristol Rovers, funny enough. Nice. And someone showed me on their phone on Twitter how he'd gone down. And yeah, it was madness. And, in total, it was, Wilson and a 4th-round pick in exchange for 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 5th-round picks, and also quarterback Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and Noah Fant. He had an 11-19 record as a Bronco. It was just awful. It was one of my ones I had considered as well. One of my ones that I've thought about. I think as well for the expectation that he set himself in Seattle, and all the stuff that we expected to be a team that people having Broncos down as Super Bowl contenders, and everyone saying he could do a Tom Brady with the Bucks or Stafford with the Rams, and it was nothing like those two at all. It was just the complete opposite end of the spectrum. And I do think in a way, obviously there's been a lot of stuff that's happened, but I think not every quarterback can play to their 45 like Tom Brady. And I think whilst he's gone to Pittsburgh and had more of a settled time, and right now it's some sort of doubt as to whether he'll be a Steeler next year. I think, he managed to somewhat redeem himself from Pittsburgh, but yeah, not exactly what you spend all that money on. I think he got a 5-year extension within the first week of being there, which I think is always a bad move.
Yeah.
Jets. It's just not at all. I remember I was at the Thursday night game, Broncos against Colts, and that was just, it is to this day the worst game I've watched in person. It was awful, and I think the fans, it's the only game I've been to where it's overtime, and I guarantee it's the only game where the fans actually didn't want overtime. It was just everyone wanted to leave. There was not a touchdown scored in the game. It was such a bad game, and I think that game defines, the Russell Wilson era. That game, it was just so bad. I think the second year wasn't as bad. I think the second year under Sean Payton, he did a little bit better, but God, that first year was just horrendous, wasn't it?
It was, and I think the extreme of absorbing so much capital to get that move, and then ultimately only getting 1.5 good or presentable years out of him, and then the dead cap hit after that was, I'm sure it was in excess of 80 million or something silly like that. So ultimately that's set them back to probably where they are now, and they're only just finding their feet again, of course, a few more years on.
Yeah, it's certainly wasn't what they expected. Speaking of which, my first one is quite the stink of an off-season deal, and I will say though, we're going to do what we did last time as well. We're going to try and we're going to get our 10 players, and we're going to try and make our list from 10 to 1 at the end of the episode. My one, I think, everything that's happened both on and off the field, this has to be up there for one of the worst trades of all time. It's Deshaun Watson, traded from the Houston Texans to the Cleveland Browns, signing a 5-year, $230 million deal. A lot of that was guaranteed. It was him, and a Texan 6th-round selection in 2024 was exchanged for Cleveland's 2022 1st and 4th round selections, the 2023 1st and 3rd round selections, and 3rd round selections. And 2024 1st and 4th round selections. And one thing that makes it worse, there's many things that make it worse. Firstly, we all know what the elephant in the room is of the off-field stuff. I mean, you're paying a guy who at the time hadn't actually been cleared of his accusations he had, which are for legal reasons accusations, and they paid a lot of money. And let's be fair, before he went to the Browns, when he was at the Texans, he was a quarterback I loved to watch. He was easily top 5 quarterback league. I remember that performance in London when they beat the Jags, and there's been many others. I remember there was the wild card game against the Bills. There's so much you could enjoy watching out of him, but of course, you all know what's happened since, and he's now someone I don't think anyone could really root for. Some Browns fans even in that field. But I think what makes it worse is two things. Firstly, from the trade the Texans got, they got Tank Dell, Will Anderson, and Stephon Diggs out of those draft picks.
Yeah,
I mean that itself. I mean, it's just criminal. But also to carry on with that as well, it's just the quarterback they got rid of to get him, Baker Mayfield, and how well he's performed since leaving. I mean, the draft picks they gave up, and they sat here with Baker Mayfield, and they got Tank Dell, Will Anderson, and Stephon Diggs. This Browns team could have been in the Super Bowl. I know
it could be.
Baker wasn't playing that well, and I think I do write for a website called Touchdown, and trying to get the template ready, you have to use the same article's template to get your different graphics up. And it's my article. I basically said Baker Mayfield wasn't a bad quarterback, but he wasn't going to be, wasn't playing that well, basically. And he's proved everyone wrong since. And I think that he could have easily stayed at Cleveland and not played well. But you think about how well he's performed with the Bucks, how these players that he could have got. I think we'd be sitting here with them at least haven't played in the title game in the AFC, let alone I think they would have made one Super Bowl. Because imagine the team they got now with Nick Chubb fully healthy, Myles Garrett, Baker Mayfield, Mari Cooper on his day, Jerry Jeudy, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, Will Anderson on defense. I know butterfly effect is a wonderful thing, and hindsight, and they could have easily gone different routes and different players, different needs at the time position-wise. But I think, the fact he's gone in, he's had all the off-field stuff going on. He's not played more than 6 or 7 games each of his 3 seasons. 19 touchdowns, 12 picks. The stat line isn't great, and I think the money he's earning, the guaranteed money he's got, all the draft pick they gave up, I think this has to be one of the worst trades of all time.
I think you're right on a million different fronts. Like you said, of course, from a outside of football perspective, that's the key thing, and that's also on the team not doing proper due diligence and considering the implications away from that. But then in terms of him and Baker Mayfield at the time, on paper, you would have gone for Watson over Mayfield. It's just so poetic almost that Mayfield has been the one that's seen a massive upturn in his career since then. And like you said, he's now a starter in most teams across the NFL. But yeah, all of that trade capital for 12 starts holds no value whatsoever.
That's the thing. 12 starts isn't even good for one season. You think 12 starts in a season means you've missed 5. That's still not, to have that in 3 seasons in total. That's insane. That is just insane to me. So Sean Watson is easily one of the top contenders for this top 10 list. Now, Danny, back with you for your next nominee for our top 10 list.
These are all really modern at the moment in time, so we don't seem to be going too far back. However, I've got to go for another quarterback, and semi-controversial because he's been a brilliant player throughout his career. But Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, unfortunately, I could not overlook. As a player, he's had a sensational career, absolutely sensational. But if I'm correct, the Green Bay Packers traded Aaron Rodgers and a 2023 first-round pick and a 2023 fifth-round pick to the Jets for the 2023 first-round pick of a higher number. I've lost the number. However, the picks aren't the issue here. The effect that Aaron Rodgers had on the Jets is unfortunately the issue. Of course, in his first season, he got injured after about 3 minutes. So that wrote him off for the season. And that really on its own would have almost been enough to justify putting him on there, because you're instantly on the back foot losing your entire first season. And then they had a little quarterback merry-go-round whilst they were trying to work around him. However, I think that the Jets gave Aaron Rodgers far too much control and dictation over what they were going to do to proceed. So the Jets were in a position where they were not full rebuild, but a few key pieces away from being able to compete and contend again. And the second that Rodgers joined, it looked like he turned into the GM. Of course, they brought in Davante Adams, his boy. That's fine. I understand that. But there was so many stories coming out at the time that were implying that if Rodgers didn't like a player, the player wasn't coming. And if Rodgers didn't like a player that was there, then it was up for trade and stuff. And I just don't think that you can give any player that kind of power. And the Jets are obviously still handling that now. They've decided to let him go after just 2 seasons, no playoffs to show for it. So for me, it's right up there.
Yeah, I think no trade sums up a franchise more than Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets. I mean, all the off-season talk, every year, the Jets always have this hype, and it's defined in this Aaron Rodgers trade. The whole months and months, it was talking about, is he going to go to the Jets, is he not? And that kind of thing, it did save the off-season, because it's a long off-season, and you need these storylines to keep the fans going, and you need talking points. So he did have a big role in sort of that. I think him and Lamar Jackson were requesting a trade for about 2 minutes. Helped save the off-season. But all the talk in the off-season, is he going to go, is he not going to go? And when he does go, many found that up. I found that up. I said he'd win the Super Bowl, because I thought he was exactly what he needed. Had Zach Wilson, and I thought it'd be, he'd be a guy that would transform the franchise. And I was saying constantly that his worst season as a Packer would be the 4th best season for any quarterback statistically in the Jets.
Yeah.
But forgetting how dysfunctional his team is, and there's a reason why that's the case. And yeah, I think it strikes me a bit like, you'll hate me saying this as a Man U fan, but Cristiano Ronaldo, sort of guy who still thinks he's there.
Yeah.
Like, accepted that he's maybe there now. And I think Rodgers, if the injury hadn't happened, he may have been a good servant. But we all saw last year in Green Bay, he wasn't the same quarterback. He was
not at all.
He missed out on the playoffs in the last game of the season, he's gone in and and he can, and then to carry on with the Jets thing, they get the let off. Okay, he's out for the season. We'll go again next year. And again, all the offseason talk, are they going to be a contender now? Now he's fully healthy. The O-line was obviously the big thing, and in the end, it wasn't great. But I think sometimes trade's more than just about that. I think the fact it's how it can impact the team more than just on the field and off it. So I think, Rodgers, having met him in London, he's a very cool guy. But it does seem like a bit like, I don't like Jerry Jones being the GM, to be honest, of the Cowboys. I don't like him getting involved and meddling. And I think Bill Belichick one as well. I think personally, you shouldn't try and do two things at once. I think no one I can think of has done both. I can't think of anyone in history who's been either a player or GM, or a GM and an owner where teams succeeded. I think it's never worked out. I think it's the reason why, Travis Hunter is a very rare two-position player, because, not many, in Deion Sanders' words, but he was definitely more of a quarterback. So I think, it's good for all walks of life. You can't, I think too many cooks spoil the broth. And I just don't think that you can try and do two things at once, because it just, rather than being excelling at one, you're being average at both. So for me, awful trade, and that is definitely a good one. Now, next up on my list is one that is, we're going back in time a little bit in this one. It's one of the more infamous trades in history. It's the Herschel Walker trade from the Vikings to the Cowboys, and also in terms of the Viking side of things. Looking at his, obviously, we all can guess from our faces and our ages. We weren't old enough for this sort of trade, but looking at the stats of his time with the Cowboys, he had 81 games for the Cowboys in 4 seasons before this mid-season trade. He had 3,491 rushing yards, 27 touchdowns, 2,556 receiving yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns. For those that haven't seen, it's not even that he was bad for the Vikings, Herschel Walker. I mean, he had over almost 4,000 all-purpose yards. I think it's more what the Vikings gave up and what resulted as a sort of domino effect of this trade. I mean, looking at the trade, the Cowboys got linebacker Jesse Solomon, linebacker David Howard, Isaac Holt, the cornerback, and defensive end Alex Stewart, but they got Vikings' first round pick from 1990 and second round and sixth round pick. Their first round pick in 1991, which was conditional on cutting Solomon. Their second round pick in 1991, conditional on cutting Howard. And their first round pick in 1992, conditional on cutting Holt. There's still more. Their second round pick from 1992, it was met by trading away Nelson. And their third round pick in 1992, which was conditional on cutting Stewart. But then the Vikings may have got Jake Reed. Jake Reed, one of the best receivers in their history, but they got some players in exchange. Now, I've actually lost that part of my page, which had the players they got. I'm quickly going to get that now, because one of them was Emmitt Smith, who's obviously has become an all-time great. But there was 2 players. I need to quickly find it.
Got Darren Woodson.
Yes, thank you.
There we go.
So, and the 3 players they got, I forget who the third guy is, but these 3 players had a massive impact on them winning multiple Super Bowls. And I think for the Vikings, Herschel Walker ended his career with 2 Pro Bowls, no Super Bowl. The Vikings never won a Super Bowl. Don't believe we even got to one at this point during his time. And I think that this seems like a very lopsided trade to me. And I think, I think the Cowboys obviously is one of their best trades in history, but I think for the Vikings, it's just, they must look back at that and thinking we could have Emmitt Smith, we could have had Super Bowls, and in the end they've not had that, and they still to this day are searching for their first Super Bowl win. So for me, it's one of the older ones, but one of the worst for sure.
I just think that one doesn't even make sense in terms of, so if you try and represent that in today's football, even someone like Patrick Mahomes is not going for a haul of that size. It was like 18 different pieces of capital, whether that be player or draft pick. Who sat there and thought, I know, this seems logical, and just threw everything they had at them? It's absolutely insane, and probably not comparable to any others in terms of the amount of capital that they gave away. Surely there is no other trades that have ever taken place that have given away that much capital, or you'd be struggling to find them at least.
Well, there's one I can think of that is going to be at least in the next 2 selections, because I've got one next on my list, and it might be next on yours. I don't know. So, Danny, who is your next, and what is now combined our 6th out of the 10 selections?
I'm coming forward again a little bit, jumping to 2019. It's Antonio Brown to the Raiders. In terms of capital, not horrendous. It was a 3rd round and a 5th round pick to the Steelers. That doesn't sound that bad, but he never played a game. So, in principle, you've just got nothing. You've just give away picks and lost a bit of money. There really isn't that too much to add to this one, really. Everybody knows Antonio Brown's extracurricular mindset away from the football field. Brilliant player on his day. And the Raiders just got really, really unfortunate with that one. And yeah, not to even step onto the field for them and to give a 3rd and 5th pick away and then obviously pay for some of his contract. Not tasty, not nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually forgot about this. That's how forgettable his time with the Raiders was. I'd forgotten about it and how bad it was. I mean, I think what makes it worse first of all, you got to think about when he joined him, he was the best receiver in the game. I think what's happened since leaving the Steelers has really, I think, cost him a Hall of Fame jacket. I think personally, he's probably on his day the best receiver I've seen in the last 10 years. I genuinely think on his day, I can't think of many better. Maybe someone like, I mean, I miss sort of Fitzgerald's prime and Calvin Johnson's, but like, you think about in the last 10 years, I can't think of any receivers that have done that well over a long time. But I think the fact that they were prepared to give up a 3rd and 5th round pick for the best receiver in the game, that should have been a red flag for the Raiders there and then.
Yeah.
As we all know, the Raiders don't do things the normal way when it comes to...
No, they don't. Still to this day.
But I think the fact of it was all done on Hard Knocks. I think it was there for everyone to see on Hard Knocks as well. He goes out and, puts on his social media an audio recording of his chat with the GM and John Gruden as well, and everything else. And yeah, it was sort of, I think it was that point where we were starting to realise that maybe he wasn't quite the kind of character we all thought. I think, I think that's certainly the point where the CTE stuff ramped up. And I think we've seen what happened since. Obviously, he went to the Patriots, played one game there, and then the Buccaneers for a bit. He redeemed himself. I think he was at one point was he living with Tom Brady at one point? And Tom Brady seemed to get him on straight and narrow. And then he wins the Super Bowl. I believe he score in the game as well. And then falls out with Tom Brady and walks off the field and never returns to it. So yeah, Antonio Brown, it's a crazy story. The biggest Madden curse in history. And yeah, that's definitely a worthwhile selection. Now, we mentioned giving up the farm with Herschel Walker. My next guy is a guy that, my team has a lot of love for. Ricky Williams going to the Saints. Ditka giving up their whole draft capital for that whole year to get him to move up to 5th overall pick for the Washington, back then the Redskins. So the full trade was, so the New Orleans Saints got the 99 1st round pick, 5th overall, whereas the Commanders got the Saints' 1st round pick, 3rd round pick, 4th round pick, 5th round pick, 6th round pick, and 7th round pick from that year, as well as the 1st and 3rd round pick from the following season as well. Williams had a good, not a bad time with the Saints. He had 2,000-yard seasons. The other one was just below 1,000 yards. So again, a bit like Herschel Walker, it wasn't as if he had a bad time with the Saints, and obviously gone on and became a Dolphins icon. Really, I think he's we haven't had many good running backs, but he's certainly one of the best we've had in our lifetime. I think he's got most of the records, if not he's second. And I think it's just to give it the whole of your draft capital for someone like that. I think he had 4 wins in his first season, didn't win anything with him there. I think for the expectation you give yourself by giving up your whole draft capital and some from the year later, you expect this guy to help you win Super Bowls. You expect this team to compete. But Mike Ditka got sacked after the season, and then someone else came in, and I forget who that was. But yeah, I think for everything, that's just, for me, we talked about before, Herschel Walker, that's something that we wouldn't even see for Patrick Mahomes. I don't think a team would do that now for get that for anyone. I don't think Jalen
No.
Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes. I don't think anyone would give up that much because I don't think anyone would do that. So yeah, crazy to me. That one has to be a selection for me.
Absolutely. The knock-on effects of missing an entire draft class is insane as well, though, because obviously you're missing out on 5, 6, 7, however many players. But the financial implication of that down the line is that you've not got those 4, 5, 6, 7 players on rookie contracts. So your entire roster has to be built on money, like big money and short-term deals and stuff like that. So it must have caused a nightmare down the line for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Danny, for your penultimate selection in our top 10, who have you got next?
Oof, let's see which one to go for. We have overlapped a little bit. I did have Ricky Williams on my list as well. So let's go for. See, this one I feel almost brutal. However, it is a top 10, and we do need some lower down the list. This is one that was I was probably 3 years into the NFL by this point, and therefore I started to actually grasp the concepts of the trades and the picks and things like that. Obviously, it doesn't all come overnight. But DeAndre Hopkins to the Cardinals, which again, in terms of the capital, is not absolutely huge. They traded him from the Texans in exchange for David Johnson. And even though Hopkins wasn't an absolute bust, they brought him in. The Cardinals brought him in with every expectation that he was going to be his peak performance and peak player. He did a steady job. But for me, when you bring in a player that you think you're bringing in their prime, like, for example, if you were to take Julio Jones or, like you said, Larry Fitzgerald, when you think they're in the prime years and then they don't give that to you, and realistically, you could have just gone middle of the park, nice and steady, and taken someone consistent and got the same outcome. I think he's in that list for me, but admittedly much lower down than some of these hectic ones that you've just put out there.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, he still had a fairly somewhat successful time there, and I do think that the worst part for me, the trade is probably what the Texans gave up. I mean, David Johnson, that's all he got back. I mean, Hopkins was one of the best receivers in the game at the time, and we all didn't know what was going to come. But back then, I think the consensus was, why are you wasting Deshaun Watson's career, getting rid of his best receiver and giving him a past it running back? So yeah, I think the Texans have thankfully managed to redeem themselves. But I think that plus the Watson stuff, I think, did damage the franchise for a few years because they went from being a prime contender, 24 points up against the Chiefs in the divisional round, on the verge of their first ever championship game, and then within a few months, it just completely got head away. So I think Bill O'Brien has a lot of, for a while, had a lot of blood in his hands until D'Amico Ryans came through the door.
Yeah.
Now, for my penultimate one, similar sort of time of NFL history, I've gone for the Chicago Bears, trading up one spot to get Mitch Trubisky, 3rd overall.
Nice.
In 2018.
Nice.
There's many reasons I've got this. I think, first of all, for the player himself, he had one good season.
Yeah.
He had a game, I think, with 6 touchdown passes. Fair enough to him. But he had one good season in 2018, and that was it. Or was it 2019? But it's more for who they missed out on. I mean, mentioning Watson again here, I mean, for a while, that was one of the guys I talked about, but maybe not now. But Patrick Mahomes was there, and the Bills, they allowed the Chiefs to trade up to get him. That's certainly one of the best trades of all time. I think the fact that it's not as even if people were saying, "Oh my God, they got the guy," even when they traded. Same with Daniel Jones. Even when they picked him in that draft, it was a 2nd overall, actually, not 3rd overall. No one was saying that's the right pick. I think everyone was saying, why the hell? I think actually people were saying more Watson than Mahomes. The people saying, why haven't you taken Deshaun Watson here? I think people felt that at the time. I mean, back then my college knowledge wasn't, my knowledge of the draft wasn't what it is now and what teams need. But I think, the consensus was that, there's at least 2 or 3 quarterbacks better than him available. And we all know what's happened. They've been dysfunctional ever since. And I'm fully aware that, Mahomes may have gone in and had been bad, and Trubisky could have gone to the Chiefs and had a good career. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I think the what ifs. I think they've been dysfunctional ever since. They still haven't had a 4,000-yard passer. They've obviously got Caleb Williams now, so they might well be okay. But even with that, either going to win 3 Super Bowls, 5 appearances in the Super Bowl, 7 straight AFC championships? I don't think so. So for me, I do feel like, Bears fans, I think, have that and double doink within a 3-year period must just absolutely kill them. So Mitch Trubisky for me is a worthy contender in this list. But now, Danny, back to you for your final nominee for this top 10 list.
So I've got 3 choices, and none are that terrifying. But let's go for. I'm going to lean towards this one. And it's a little bit controversial because it's not actually a complete bust technically to date. But Reddick to the New York Jets last year, based on the fact that he didn't play the first 7 games, because after agreeing to move there, he wanted a new contract. The Jets wouldn't give it to him. And ultimately, they were in a standoff, weren't they? And I just don't think that represents well on the player. Or again, the Jets have come up quite a few times in these conversations tonight. But I just don't think it reflects well on either. Saying yes to a team, but knowing you want more money and not disclosing that first is shocking. But bringing a player in and not being aware of his requirements is also shocking. And Reddick is was obviously this season's been a bizarre one, but previously Reddick has been a very, very good player, and he was touted by a lot of teams. And then that to be how it ended just really summed up the Aaron Rodgers era at the Jets, because that was just another thing in the team at the time that did not click at all. Whether he had any impact on that, I don't know. But yeah, Hassan Reddick to the New York Jets.
Yeah, the fact that he's left the Eagles and then they've gone out and won a Super Bowl, I think, a guy that I was very big on. I was very big on him. And I think on his day, he's been a very good player in the NFL. So I think he must look back and think, what the hell they're doing. And he could be sitting here with a ring. But no, turns out he's playing for one of the worst teams in the league. Jets definitely have been the poster boys of this episode. I think they've been mentioned about, 3,000 times so far.
Yeah.
So I had 3 more players I wanted to include. I want to talk about a couple of honourable mentions. I think one of them is the Colts trading for Trent Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
And also the one I want to sort of talk about is the Chargers trading it to get Ryan Leaf 2nd overall. Because
I didn't have that one. Nice.
Well, actually, it's between this one and something else. Now I want to. Do I go for the other one? I'll think of including as my final selection. Team actually went on and made the Super Bowl since. So, yeah, maybe
It's hard, isn't it? I've got a few that I'm looking back on thinking, maybe they deserve to be on the list, but we can't pick them all.
You know what I'm going to do? I literally made a Super Bowl, but I have to include this guy. First of all, I want to go back to Ryan Leaf. I mean, one reason why I wanted to include him was the obvious reason, first of all, was how bad of a bust he was. One of the biggest quarterback busts, in the last, in history. I think it's only really I can think of probably Jamarcus Russell, that maybe Johnny Manziel, that probably would outdo Ryan Leaf. And the fact that, Randy Moss was there in the draft, Charles Woodson, Matt Hasselbeck went in the 4th round, so he could have got him at quarterback and got him in a later round and got Randy Moss 2nd overall, or Charles Woodson, who went 4th overall. And they could have waited the year and got Donovan McNabb as well. So I think, obviously we all know what's happened with Ryan Leaf in his career. But for me, I've gone for a more modern one. One of the most, I think, one of the worst in the last 3 or 4 years. It's the 49ers trading up to get Trey Lance 3rd overall back in 2021. Looking at the total, what they gave up a 3 first-round picks and a 3rd round pick. And he's played next to no games, had a lot of injury problems, and is now pretty much an afterthought for NFL teams. He's a Cowboys backup. I thought maybe he's a 3rd choice. I thought he would have got a chance when Dak went down. Didn't happen. I think what makes it worse is not the fact that they've traded up all these draft picks to get a guy who's barely played and is out the door. And they did. I'm fully aware that if they hadn't struck lucky with Brock Purdy, he may still be there. He may be able to. And he wasn't lucky. He wasn't lucky. I mean, Trey Lance was someone that I felt was unlucky. Injuries happen at the wrong time. How often do you have a team go and get Mr. Relevant? He turns out to be the future guy. That's one in a million. So I do feel sorry for him. But I think what makes it even worse for the Niners is, the fact that, they missed out on the Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff. But it's who the Dolphins use those picks on. I mean, Jalen Waddle was used with that. They traded. Yeah. He originally traded, was it from 12 and then back with someone else and then back to 6 with the Niners, or something like that. So they got Jalen Waddle. They used one of the draft picks on Tyreek Hill as part of that bounty. They also got, I believe, Bradley Chubb as well as part of the list. So the fact that they allowed Dolphins to get, as a result, Tyreek Hill, Waddle, and Chubb, and I'm very thankful for that. But for the Niners, I think to give all that capital for a guy who's barely played, same thing as Watson, but for very different reasons. For me, it's a bad indictment on John Lindbergh. I think that was from what I saw, he barely played college games. They sort of took a chance, I think, on a guy who had, we saw in the college tapes an arm, but I think what's proved is that that's not enough for you to have the durability, and he hasn't proved that at all. So there we are. We have our top 10. So I'm going to quickly run through who we both went for. So myself, I went for Deshaun Watson. Then I went for Herschel Walker, Ricky Williams, Mitch Trubisky, and Trey Lance. With Danny went for Aaron. Sorry, my page is messed up here. I've just went for Russell Wilson to the Broncos. He went for Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. He went for Antonio Brown to the Raiders, Hopkins to the Cardinals, and also finally Hassan Reddick to the Jets. Now, we're going to have to try now get this list down from 10 to 1. Now, I think personally, I'm happy to put Trey Lance 10th because you didn't include him, and I was whether to have him or not. So I'm happy to have him 10th. I think that's one thing we can get out of the way. Maybe get that 10th.
I will either give you that, or I'll tag in me being a little bit brutal and go for DeAndre Hopkins to the Cardinals, because also that wasn't that chaotic as such. But I'm happy with either. It's an unfortunate one, Trey Lance. He's still only 24, isn't he? So it's one of those that that trade was really bad, but you never know. He could do a Mayfield and peak in 5 years' time.
That'll be good. I think that'll be good. I don't see it personally, but you never know. No. Having resurgent year with the Vikings, so maybe you'll put Hopkins 10 and Trey Lance 9th. Maybe
I'm all good with that. Yeah.
So then the rest of our list, we've got to choose between. I think it's trying to get the players we don't think should be outside top 5. I think for me personally, I want to put in there. I do think Herschel Walker and Deshaun Watson should be in that top 5. Are there any players that you can think of?
Maybe Russell Wilson, based on the haul, and then you also had Ricky. Did you say Ricky Williams then? Yeah. Walker, Williams, Watson, Wilson, and that's tricky.
Maybe Rodgers, because you had him your second person you chose. Maybe.
Yeah, true. I mean, I do strongly believe it's blown up the franchise. So, I suppose.
So maybe we'll have Watson, Walker, and Wilson as top 3 because Rodgers was one you. So maybe put Rodgers 4th just to get that one in, just because that would be top 4, but maybe not. Maybe one that we were umming and ahhing whether to have that as the top 3. So that leaves then we've got to try and pick between from 5 to 8. We've got Hassan Reddick to the Jets. We've got Ricky Williams to the. Oh, we've already done Ricky Williams. Mitch Trubisky, Antonio Brown to the Raiders. I think there's one more I've missed out on here. Is that right? So we've got.
I think Reddick being being the next available low space is probably fair because it's a
Yeah.
bad move, but I don't think it's anywhere near some of the other ones up there.
Okay, so that put him 8. So that means we then got to pick between 3 players for the 5, 6, and 7 spots. That is, no, we've got. I feel like it happened last week. I feel like I'm missing someone here. Mitch Trubisky, Antonio Brown. I swear there's one more. Have we done 9? We done 9 again. I said this last week with Meg.
We definitely did 10, so there should be 10.
Watson.
I did Reddick, Rodgers, Wilson, Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, I think we're missing one of yours.
Yeah, this happened last week. I need to. My memory's shocking at times because there's one more that wasn't.
Walker, Williams.
Oh,
Watson.
I didn't include Williams in the.
Right. Okay.
So we'll put Rodgers 5th then. So we got between Antonio Brown and Mitch Trubisky for the 6th, 7th positions.
They're pretty close in different ways. Obviously, one's trading up and it not going well, and one's trading everything and him not even stepping foot on the field. So I think at least Trubisky had a season of football, I suppose.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So maybe we'll put Trubisky 7th, but Antonio Brown 6th. Okay, so now into the money area. We've got Deshaun Watson from the Texans to the Browns, Herschel Walker from the Vikings to the Cowboys, Russell Wilson from the Seahawks to the Broncos, and Ricky Williams from to the Saints via that massive trade. Right, okay.
4 up.
I'll tell you what we'll do, because we did this last time with Meg. Each name one player we think should be 4th. Is there anyone, like, I want to put Watson in the ring. I don't think he should be 4th. I think he should be at least top 3. Anyone you think out of that 4 that maybe you would not want to see 4th, that you think that's too low?
I'd agree. I'd agree with Watson based on the fact that it's right up there. I think out of the 4 remaining, I'd lean towards Wilson being our number 4.
I like that.
Based on the fact that it is still really bad. However, the picks we have left are Watson, not good. Williams losing a whole draft class and more. And then Herschel Walker losing 18 pieces of players and draft picks. So there's no way Wilson's quite that bad.
I think I've got it. I think I can crack down this top 3. So I think that we both said Watson first. I think maybe he should be number 1.
Okay, yeah.
The fact that Walker and Williams, I think that's tough because
it's much closer than some of the other ones. Those, but
because I do think at one point Williams was good with the Saints, but then Walker was good with the Vikings. And I think both teams had massive impacts. I think the Vikings obviously maybe because they traded with the Redskins back then and they didn't win anything. So maybe the fact that the Cowboys won something out of the trade and the Vikings almost wondering what if. Maybe put Walker 2nd and Williams 3rd. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah. And I suppose based on Walker, more capital was actually moved for him as well. So even though Williams was a whole draft class, it still numerically wasn't as many pieces either.
I think we've got a top 10. And again, like with Meg last week, a very amicable top 10. We've managed to not argue too much about this one. Let's go back to our top 10. So our top 10 from 10 to 1 is DeAndre Hopkins going from the Texans to the Cardinals. Number 9 is Trey Lance being picked by the Niners 3rd overall with many draft picks given up. Number 8 is Hassan Reddick's move from the Eagles to the Jets. Number 7 is the Bears trading up 1 position to get Mitch Trubisky 2nd overall. Number 6 is Antonio Brown's trade from the Steelers to the Raiders. Number 5 is Aaron Rodgers' trade from the Packers to the Jets. Number 4 is Russell Wilson's trade from the Seahawks to the Broncos. Number 3 is Ricky Williams' trade. The Saints trading up to get Ricky Williams with all their draft capital and some for the following year. Number 2 is the Herschel Walker trade, and number 1 is the Sean Watson going from the Texans to the Browns. So there we are. That is our top 10 list done. And do let us know in the comments. They do help a lot with our podcast. What you think of this top 10 list? Anyone we've missed out on? Would you position any of these players differently to the other? Let us know on socials, on podcasts, however you listen to our podcast. But either way, that is where we'll end the podcast for today. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Danny for coming on today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a lot of fun, as always, and hopefully we can run something back again towards the upcoming season.
Absolutely, and you'll be sure to see Danny again a lot of times on this podcast. But if you haven't, first of all, where have you been? But if you haven't been aware of Danny's content, where can they find you?
So me personally, I'm on TikTok and X as _firstdowndanny_. But I am also the co-founder and 1/4 of ATL Falcons UK, which is the biggest Atlanta Falcons fan base outside of America. So we do podcasts, weekly shows. We're on every single social. So you'll catch me scattered between the two of them. But First Down Danny is all ball. So if you hate the Falcons, go that way. If you like the Falcons, come to ATL Falcons UK.
Any trips planned to America this year to watch the Falcons? You had that, we mentioned it when you last came on, your trip to the Falcons game in Atlanta. Any plans this year to go down again?
We're hoping to. The only catch at the moment in time is there's a high chance that the Falcons could be playing in Germany this year, because when you run through the Colts roster, the Colts are the team that are playing over there. When you run through them, we're a team that's playing, and it only works down to 3 other teams. So we've got a 1 in 3 chance of being the team over there. And the Falcons a couple of years ago signed a commercial deal in Germany. So if you add all of the pieces together, we might be over there. So that could be more tempting.
I mean, I did a prediction for all the international games about who I think each team plays. And I think I had the Raiders playing the Colts in Berlin. But I think what you said then, I think we saw the Dolphins do a lot of stuff in Madrid. We had players like Courtois going to games in Miami, and we had Tua going to the Northeast. I think Madrid went to the Dolphins training facility. Bellingham got a picture with Tua, and I think if you're seeing teams doing that on their social, I think that's a big clue. I think to what they're trying to do. There's I've heard about one team doing a lot of market stuff in a certain country. And I've heard that isn't Germany, by the way. That I've seen a lot of talk about them doing a lot of market stuff with that city. So I think, I got a little bit of a idea of who it could be in one of the games. But I think you just don't know. I didn't think the Jets would be back on the back-to-back years, so you never know. But I think for logistic-wise, for a British fan, I think if you can see your team in Germany, rather than America. I mean, first of all, flights. You can get a flight to Germany for sometimes less than £100.
Exactly.
The only way you get that is if you work for an airline. If you get something, I think absolutely. I think I'm hoping to this year go to the Dolphins game. Obviously, hoping to go to the Madrid game. Otherwise, it's hopefully you get to go, man. And hopefully you, whether it's in America or Germany, hopefully you get to
absolutely. And just to cap it off, I hope I get to a London game this year. When we went to Atlanta last season, that's when the London games were clashed really badly. So for the first time in 6 years, we didn't get the opportunity to go. But of course, we had to prioritize going to Georgia. So,
it's a chance to go there, and all the chance to go there and do all the stuff he did on the sidelines. That was just a life opportunity of a lifetime.
Exactly.
Do you tend to do just one game in London? Do you tend to try and do all 3? Like, how do you plan your London games?
We've done a little bit of everything over the years. Generally speaking, we'll just do the one. But in our first 2 or 3 years, we did 2 at the time before it started expanding. It was only initially Wembley when we were going at the start. So we of course, it's made it a little bit more of a plan if you want to go to one of each game and stay over the weekend and everything. We're from Manchester, so we either have to go down and come back up if it's the next weekend, or it's a logistical nightmare, or justify staying in London for a week, which is not easy to do.
No, it's certainly not cheap. And I'm very fortunate that I know an Airbnb host, so I get lovely discount off that Airbnb.
Nice.
But otherwise, yeah, I remember originally when I was meant to be traveling and not being available that weekend in London. One of the times I was looking at hotels, and it was like I was literally paying double what I was paying for his Airbnb.
Yeah.
For just like 3 nights rather than 7 days. So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. That is London for you. But it's
well worth it when you're down there, though. Well worth it for the London
absolutely.
games.
It's always a good time, and I'm hopefully I'll be there again this year. But yeah, there we are. That's our top 10 worst trades of NFL history episode done. We're having another one of these top 10s. We've got a few lined up. We've got a few booked in with a few returning guests of the show, so keep an eye out for them. We got top 10 draft moments is one of the ones coming up. Of course, we got our mock draft coming up. That is all confirmed. We got our 3 guests from last season all there in Rory Joe Daniels, Sam Moores, and Freddie Harper Davis, who will be returning to do our annual mock draft. But in the meantime, this has been the Across the Pod NFL podcast. As ever, your host, Andy Davis. Our guest today, Danny Foulkes, aka First Down Danny. And we'll see you guys next time.